Hi, everyone. Sorry for the wait. YouTube decided not to talk to Zoom, so there we are. But I think we're all solved. Welcome. I'm Siân Evans. I'm the academic liaison for history of science and technology, Africana studies, and the program for the study of women and sexuality here at Johns Hopkins Sheridan Libraries. And I get to wear two hats tonight because I'm also one of the co-founders of Art+Feminism. It's my absolute pleasure to be here among so many friendly faces, both in person and online. We had people register from literally all over the world, from Athens, Ohio to Athens, Greece, and Mozambique and Chile and everywhere. So we're really excited to have you all with us. And on this note of gratitude, I also want to thank Kira Wisniewski and Art+Feminism for partnering with Sheridan Libraries and doing most of the heavy lifting in terms of organizing tonight's program, including the online interpreters who are helping create a multilingual space. And of course, I want to thank Sheridan Libraries for co-sponsoring the event, and especially Paul Espinosa, curator of the gorgeous George Peabody Library, for all his help getting this event up and running. And finally, of course, our two excellent speakers, Savannah Wood and Teri Henderson. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you all today. And I'm also going to, the slides went off. Okay, great. I want to start by talking about Art+Feminism's Brave Friendly Space Agreement, which you can see on screen here. So the goal of this session is to create an encouraging space for collective learning. This requires intentional behavior wherein participants are conscious and accountable for the effect of their statements and actions on others. We respect our experiences and the experiences of others and recognize that we can't do this work without one another. So let us all agree to hold each other accountable to a brave, friendly space. And now, if I can, to set the stage for this exciting conversation, I'm pleased to introduce Kira Wisniewski, the Executive Director of Art+Feminism.
Thanks, Siân. Thank you all for being here. Thank you also our online participants for your patience and our in real life participants for your patience. Tech difficulties, y'all. We can't avoid them. Is Mercury in retrograde? I'm not sure. Here we are. Anyway, hi. My name is Kira Wisniewski, and I have the distinct honor and privilege of being the executive director here at Art+Feminism. And I know from registration that 90% of you, approximately, have never been to an Art+Feminism event before. So if you would indulge me for just a few moments where I help, hopefully, give you some context about what this organization is. But can we do a show of hands, or you can use an emoji if you're joining us online, who has heard of Wikipedia? Oh, okay. Who has edited Wikipedia or something on the Wikiverse? Okay, less, but still some, so that's what's up. Art+Feminism builds a community of information activists. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to close the information gaps related to gender, feminism, and the arts, beginning with Wikipedia. And I know that that sounds very specific and niche, and it is on purpose. So Wikipedia is, even in the year of 2026, is still one of the most visited websites in the world. And it's a key source from everything from Google searches to museum labels, but still over 80% of those editors identify as cis white men. And so that leads to not only gaps in representation, but also gaps in information. And so here at Art+Feminism, we strive to change that. We do this through educational programs and resources. We train and support people of all backgrounds to edit the Wikiverse and amplify voices that are often left out of history. So our core initiative is an annual do-it-yourself and do-it-together campaign where we empower people of all gender identities to edit and organize around Wikipedia. I don't know where I'm pointing this. So as Siân mentioned, she is one of the co-founders of our organization. And when she, along with Jackie, Michael, and Laurel, founded Art and Feminism in 2014, since then, Art and Feminism community has either created or edited or improved over 370,000 articles on Wikipedia in over 27 different languages and with over 40,000 participants worldwide. Okay, so we've established that pretty much everyone here has heard of Wikipedia, but who has heard of Wikidata? Okay, some, shout out to y'all, but less, and understandably so, because structured data, it's just not as sexy, right? But it is at the base of what Wikipedia feeds onto, and it also trains things like AI and smart technologies. And so when that data is incomplete or biased, it ripple effects across the internet as well as consumption of knowledge. And we're drawing on over a decade of community organizing in the Wikiverse to create a global intervention through structured data, because we need feminist data to tell feminist stories. Those gaps we mentioned on Wikipedia are even worse on Wikidata. And we're in a critical moment now to be able to have an impactful feminist intervention to make sure that these gaps are not further perpetuated. We're inviting our community, all of you here and online, to help us in this work. And there's lots of ways that you can do that. I would be remiss, of course, to not mention that there are numerous other wiki projects that are focused on intersectional feminisms. We aren't alone in this work, and we want to shout out some of those other organizations, because collectively, we can make tangible impacts on information access. We'll ensure that information is more inclusive, reliable, and feminist. So I invite you all to dream with us, join us in our work as we lean into our year 2 of our campaign, What Would a Truly Feminist Internet Look Like? And I'm going to pass it back over to Siân.
So now I have the great pleasure of introducing our speakers tonight. So Savannah Wood is an artist with deep roots in Baltimore and Los Angeles. Wood works primarily in photography, text, and installation to explore how spirituality, domesticity, and our relationships to place shape our identities. Her projects reconnect people with the everyday beauty of our world and the histories that lie hidden below the surface. As the executive director of Afro Charities, Wood is leading the charge to increase access to the 130-plus-year-old Afro-American newspaper's extensive archives. In this role, she has shepherded the organization through a period of historic growth, initiated new programming, and attracted support from national funders, including the Mellon Foundation, the Andy Warhol Foundation for the Visual Arts, and the Ruth Foundation. Wood is a graduate cum laude of the University of Southern California. She is a 2025 Johns Hopkins Tab Center Public Humanities Fellow, a member of the 2023 class of the Leadership Baltimore. Do you want me to keep reading? There's so many, y'all. And Teri Henderson is a Baltimore-based independent curator, author, and editor. She previously served as the arts and culture editor of the Baltimore Beat, and her critical writing has appeared in Artforum and the Washington Post. In 2020, she founded the global platform Black Collagists, leading to her acclaimed book, Black Collagists, the Book. Henderson's curatorial work includes consulting for the National Museum of Women in the Arts, New World's Women to Watch 2024, and the Victoria and Albert Museum. She also served on the jury for the Baltimore Museum of Art's Histories Collide, Jackie Millard, Fred Wilson, and Nikisha Durrett. Recent and upcoming projects include co-curating Layers, the Art of Contemporary Collage at MICA, the inaugural Scout Affordable Art Fair with Derek Adams in 2025, and the Black Collage Aesthetic Legacies at the Delaware Contemporary, opening in February 2026. She is a 2024 fellow of both the Poynter-Koch Media and Journalism Program and the Maynard Institute. And now I'm going to invite them both to the stage, where Savannah is going to briefly introduce Afro News and Afro Charities to set the stage for their conversation.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. This is still, to me, the beginning of the year, and I think it shows in our energy today. I forgot to edit that bio. That was very long. We're going to work our way through this event. We're going to do great.
30 or 10 minutes at a time.
Yeah, 10 minutes at a time. This is our first conversation of the year, our first public conversation of the year, so bear with us a little bit, okay? We need a little grace. I've been talking about the Afro for the past 6.5 years at least, and so hopefully I have this down pat. The Afro-American Newspaper Company was founded in Baltimore, Maryland in 1892. And by 1897, my great-great-grandparents, who are on the screen, John Henry Murphy and his wife Martha Elizabeth Howard Murphy, purchased the paper, and since then our family's been running it. So it's still in operation today, 133 years later. This is its iconic headquarters at North Utah Street, where the Afro was in publication and printing there inside for about 80 years. All of the production happened on site in a union shop, which I think is really important to note. The Afro is the oldest Black-owned business in Maryland, and we believe it's the third oldest in the United States. So in terms of contextualizing this, I wanted to share that information. You'll see on the left here a cover of the Richmond Afro-American. So while it was founded in Baltimore, there were 5 different offices in the United States: in Richmond, Virginia, Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Maryland, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Newark, New Jersey. And out of those 5 offices, they printed several different editions that would go all over the world. They had reporters in Europe during World War II. They sent reporters to Africa, all over the continent during liberation struggles there. So there's really a wealth of information in the collection from all over the globe. In the center, you'll see production that was happening in that plant that we just saw an image of on North Utah Street in Baltimore. And then on the far right are what we call bound volumes, which are full runs of the newspaper from either January to July or January to December for each of those different editions that we talked about that are bound in a big book and stored in the archives. So I am the executive director of Afro Charities, which is a nonprofit partner to the historic Afro-American Newspaper Company. We were founded in 1963, primarily to do charitable projects within Baltimore. But since moving back to Baltimore in 2019, I worked to expand the mission of Afro Charities to include care for the Afro's historic archives. You'll see some of those archives on the screen here. So on the far left and in this, well, all of them really, are images from a youth program that we did. This one was in 2021, where we invited students at Coppin Academy on Coppin State University's campus to come to the archives and spend time with us and create new projects inspired by their research. But you get a sense of the scale of the collection in that image to the left. Those boxes are completely full, as you see in the center image, of files that have any number of things in them. So this image says Nation of Islam. There's, I think, the National Council for Negro Women in this pulled out drawer. So it's generally in alphabetical order, but not exactly. And so there's a huge project happening right now. Megan McShay is in the audience, our lead archivist, who is fabulous, and leading our processing project at Afro Charities to make these collections more accessible to the public. As part of that, we're reorganizing the actual physical folders so that they're in a true alphabetical run. We're updating the data that is publicly accessible online. And all of that is in preparation for our move to a new headquarters where people will be able to actually access these materials on site for the first time in 133 years. It's big. Yeah. It's the day after Martin Luther King Jr. Day in the United States. And in the center, we have a reel-to-reel that just says Martin Luther King speech. This was found in a box in the archives, undigitized. On the far right, we have a comic by Thomas Stockett, who was a cartoonist with the Afro for about 40 years. And the comic reads, "Excuse me, which way to the unemployment line?" And the other bubble says, "You're in it," which I think can be, these things are applicable today as well. So these are just a glimpse into the archives. We do programming, like I mentioned before, with students. We also have trained archivists to work with us, which is like one of the things that I find to be most exciting, but I'm not sure how much more of that we can actually do moving forward. We're becoming more institutionalized, so we'll talk about that a little bit more too. It's turning from a startup into something else. We have done artist commissions with the archive. So this is an image from a project with Xavier Simmons, a New York-based artist who spent a lot of time with our collection digitally, virtually, and created new works incorporating them. So this is an installation shot of her exhibition in Paris that we did in partnership with an organization called Cadist. This is a talk that we did as part of that. So we're always just trying to find ways to bring the archives into the present and to connect contemporary audiences to this really rich, robust history. This is the site that we're building in Baltimore. The ZS in the corner is Ziggersneed Architects. There are architects for this. But we are redeveloping a historic building that's been vacant for about 20 years. It was built in 1838 as a private residence. It became a radio station. It was the second radio station in the state of Maryland. And then it became the Baltimore Institute of Musical Arts, which was established because Peabody, where we are right now, would not accept black students. And so the Baltimore Institute of Musical Arts opened for a short time until integration happened in the US. And then following that, it became part of the Baltimore City public school system until about 2006 when it was left vacant. So we are currently redeveloping the historic mansion and then building an annex at the rear that you see there. And this is from several different stages of construction. So this is happening right now. So all of that is essentially just to set the stage for what we're going to talk about today. And I hope that's helpful context. And if there's other questions, we'll get into those also. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Kira. And I'm honored to be sitting here with Savannah. We first met, I think it was 2020, when I was working at Connect and Collect, and you curated Close Read, which was an exhibition of works that were from the Afro archives, if I remember correctly. So it was you, Akia Breon Brown, and Shan Wallace. So that work back then was so deeply rooted in what your family does and what you do. And so I kind of watched you take these historical documents, these records, and translate them and transform them into something that everybody could experience, which I kind of think is a really cool thing that you're doing with the new building as well. And so now you are caring for the living memory on this huge scale. So thank you for the work that you do. It's inspiring. But at Art and Feminism, where I am the secretary, we ask, what would a feminist internet truly look like? But before we can fix the internet, we have to look at the source, which is the archives themselves. And so, Savannah, let's start with where stories live. So people often think of archives as maybe dusty boxes in a basement, but y'all are, Afro Charities is doing something radical. So you're in the, as you said before, you're in the process of restoring the historic Upton Mansion to be the new permanent physical home for the Afro Archives. So can you kind of just talk a little bit about the new building? Why is it so important for this collection to have its own dedicated space in West Baltimore? And rather than maybe it being absorbed into a university, like where we are, or a cloud server, what does it mean to take up that space?
Thank you. And the project that Teri was talking about is the first iteration of our artist commissioning project. And so it was the first time that we invited artists into the collection specifically to think about, you know, what could you do with these collections? And Teri was working at that gallery, which happened to be the former site of the Afro on North Charles Street. So not the one that I showed in that image, but the one after that. So there was a lot of like spatial resonance with having the show there also. And I was a fellow at the Deutsch Foundation at that time, in the first year of coming back here, which was also very bizarre to be in that building working on the Afro, and it was like a very different building. So,
was that the first time, like you were digitizing the records yourself back then, right? Or
I was just getting to know them.
Yeah.
You know, I was really just getting in the collection and starting to explore them a bit. And you mentioned something about like people thinking about archives as like dusty boxes and dusty, and it is that. Like it's definitely that. We just went to an off-site storage facility for some of the Afro materials, and I was like, oh no, this is not good. It's very dusty in here. So it can be that. It can be a lot of things. I think one of the reasons why it's so important for me that we are stewarding this project and we didn't just give the collections to a university is because the Afro still exists, for one. So it's like there's still this institution that has been here for 133 years, which is longer than some of the other institutions that are here. Yeah. And so it's definitely a different kind of organization. The Afro News Company is a news organization that is producing news. That's the primary thing that they do. They're a media company. They're not in information sciences. They're not in that field. So I understand that. But it's material that they've generated, and it's material that is generated with the trust of their community. And so in a way for us, even though Afro Charities is technically separate from the news company, it's related, we're aligned, we're like the cool little cousin, yes. But we're stewarding this collection within the context that it was created within, which I think is really important for helping people understand why the material matters, and that they still have access to it. Mm-hmm. Also, there's a way in which materials can go to a university and then not be prioritized, and so we know that we're going to make this a priority. There have been efforts throughout the years to get the collection more organized. There was an effort in 2008 with Johns Hopkins, actually, Mellon-funded project that was basically cataloging the collection down to a folder level. So we have an initial database that was created from that time. The problem is that it wasn't kept up over time, and so the database itself essentially became obsolete and was unsupported, and has been for the past maybe decade. So with our new team, we were able to extract that data. I told you about the processing project we're working on right now, which is a huge undertaking, and updating the data and putting it into archive space. So as the data is ready, it's in archive space, people can have access to it and see it there. We're verifying it, we're adding new data that wasn't there initially, all those things are happening. You talked about physical space.
Yes, but no, that's also, all of it's related. Yeah.
But the physical space that we're building, I have a really strong feeling that being in person matters, yes, for a lot of reasons. And in Baltimore in particular, there's so many layers of history in this city. And in West Baltimore, where we are, there's so much history there. That's basically where the Afro got its start also. And so for us to come back to that site feels like a reclamation of space in a place that, for people who are watching from all over the world, is very deeply blighted, but has an incredibly rich history that has shifted the course of U.S. history. So it makes sense to me that we would invest in this space that has given us so much as a people nationally, and to kind of reinstill a sense of pride in this site. It also means that people have a physical place to come to where they have questions about something, and we're in this era of so much AI and misinformation that there's a physical record that's in your neighborhood even that you can come and consult. Mm-hmm. That matters to me. I think that's really important. And then the Afro News Company will actually be on site with us there as well. And so to be in the building where they're producing the news that is also in the archives is kind of this amazing cyclical thing that's happening. So I'm excited about all of those factors.
Thank you.
That was long-winded.
No, I appreciate that. No, I just can't wait to see it. I'm not even going to ask you when, but I just can't wait to see it.
You can ask me when. It's okay.
When?
We're looking at, I used to shy away from that one, but we're looking at first quarter of 2027. Yes. I think probably, I'll say that. I'll say that. First quarter of 2027. Construction is unwieldy.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So the next thing that I want to talk about is kind of the tension of privacy versus open access. So there is this kind of tension in this work in the tech and library world where open access is usually seen as the ultimate goal. Mm-hmm. So making everything free and searchable. But for Black communities, visibility has often meant surveillance. So when you are digitizing the Afro archives or thinking about that, how do you navigate that? And does a feminist internet include the right to not be found? Mm-hmm. I think so. And how do you protect the people in your records?
It's a really good question. I think, if people look back into the Afro, historically, we were all up in everybody's business. Like 3-inch high headlines that's like pastor seen leaving hotel with, and it's like, ooh, it's salacious. So there's a lot of expose that was happening. And then it was common practice for newspapers at the time to print your address, your age, like all of this information with your image. It was just like, how you have to take somebody's name down. They're putting everything in there. This person who lives at this address and is 11 years old is, all of the info is there. So most of the actual newspapers, specifically for Baltimore, are already digitized and available on ProQuest, going back to like 1893. But there's so much more in the collection. So there's letters in the collection. There are, there's a little bit of film. There's like a little bit of audio stuff, not a lot. Most of it's paper. Most of it's paper and images. We estimate there's about 3 million images. And then on the backs of each of those images is usually a caption that has all that information that I was describing. And so it's something that we're still kind of figuring out how to approach. We're not in a mass digitization phase with those materials yet, so we still have some time to kind of think through it. But we're thinking, about takedown policies. Like if somebody reaches out and says, I don't want this image up, what do we do? Do we take it down? Probably. Like that's my ethic is yes. There's just so much in there that we don't even know each individual item that's there. We know things on a folder level, and we haven't even gotten through all of that yet. So it's hard to say exactly how that will go. But yeah, I think there is a right to privacy, even in archives. And there's something about like, the way that we've kind of survived in this country is by having a space apart and by having, not having everything out in the street. Like I just got this message from my mom's friend and it was this Instagram page and she's like, I love this woman. And the woman is an AI generated, like elder Black woman who's on a farm and telling you like down home recipes in like a Southern drawl. And I went and looked at the profile and I was like, this profile is based in Lithuania. And it was created last year and she's in the same outfit in every video. Like, this is not a human, And so I had to send that to her. But it's like, there's a way in which like when too much information is available, people are trying to hijack that. And I don't know for what purpose. Like, I don't know why this person in Lithuania is creating this character who's telling me to brew clove tea, but something is amiss here, and there's too much information that they're pulling from to create a character, and I don't want to put too many things out that allow for that kind of knowledge. I don't know. So there's something in there that makes me feel really uneasy. So we're just trying to be cautious about it. So even if we do digitize, there might just be like layers of access, and we'll see.
So we are here at JHU, and so I kind of want to acknowledge that you were named the Tabb Center Public Humanities Fellow. So congratulations here at Sheridan Libraries. Yay! It's a big deal. And then 3 weeks ago, I started in my new role at Charm City Cultural Cultivation. And thank you. And one of the core programs, which you reminded me of, was the Black Baltimore Digital Database. And so in that, part of that is creating a counter-institutional space. So where Black people can catalog our own history on our own terms. So I guess I want to ask, how do you kind of hinted at this a little bit about what maybe you started out is kind of becoming bigger and more institutionalized, which might be necessary for survival. So how do you balance that, and how can we use the resources of big institutions, like your fellowship, to support your work without giving up sovereignty or ownership, which I know that you're maintaining, but just...
Yeah, it's a good question, because there's a way in which like sometimes funders will want to dictate the way that you do the work that you do, and so trying to find ways to resist that wherever possible is important. With the Hopkins Fellowship, it became like a really wonderful opportunity for me to explore my artistic language a little bit more. And Mecca Lewis is here, who helped me on a short film that we made for that fellowship. but I was thinking about like, a filmic essay in that space, and it gave me kind of a space apart from my day-to-day work life to think and do things. And so I appreciated the fellowship for that. And so in terms of using institutional resources, it was like, that was helpful for me to think about another part of myself that is not necessarily in the Afro archives all the time. But more generally for for sovereignty in your own practices and using resources. As we get bigger, we're going to need to have more concrete systems. We're going to need to have more people. We're probably not going to be able to have the same kind of archival fellowships for a moment, where we're training people how to do the work, because we just need people who know what they're doing to come in and do it. we got deadlines now, It's like there's things we said we're going to do, and we got to get them done. All of that. So, but there is a world I can imagine in which that educational part becomes a core part of our program also, and then becomes something that we can sustain long term. But right now we're kind of feeling the pressure to a degree of knowing that we're going to open this space, and also knowing that we probably won't have the full collections process by the time we open the space. And so, okay, we'll sit with that. That's probably fine, and we'll just have to communicate it. But I don't know if that answers your question, but that's where we are.
No, it's exciting. And so I have one more question before we open it up for Q&A. So with the new building, do you have a name for it? Do you know what you're going to call it?
Yes.
Can you tell me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. I can't believe I didn't say this yet. Dion would be so mad at me. It is the Martha E. Murphy Research Institute, also known as MEMRI. MEMRI.
That's amazing.
Yeah, let it sink in.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was because so often when people talk about the Afro legacy, they talk about my great-great-grandfather, and it's like Martha was the one who had the money. She's the one who put the money down so that they could have this business. She birthed the entire workforce, okay? She's the reason why this thing exists. So she needed her name on something, and so that's how we're going to do that. Yeah, it's really exciting.
That's so exciting. So the new building, and I'm thinking about the future. Mm-hmm. So if we, in this space, build physical homes and digital tools correctly, what does the landscape of Black memory look like in Baltimore 50 years from now? Mm. What would be your ideal fast forward?
There's a way in which Baltimore I feel like we always are trying to prove to the world that we matter in some way, which is everybody should just know this by now.
Cool it is. Yeah.
You should just know this by now.
Obviously.
Baltimore has such a huge root in American history, in world history, frankly, from that perspective. And I don't think people who live here know enough about our own history. So I would hope that in 50 years, if we're doing things right, if we're making archival research exciting and accessible and making people want to come into it, that more people will understand the space that we live in and why it's so interesting, why it's so important. That would be my hope. Yeah, that would be my hope.
No, it's gonna happen. I can see it. No. So I guess we are opening it up to questions in cyberspace and in this library physically.
Yes. Thanks so much, everyone. And thank you for that wonderful conversation. I'm really excited to open it up to you all. This is just a reminder that Q&A is a great opportunity to deepen our understanding of the conversation that we just heard. So please make sure you frame your comments as a question to our speakers. If you're here in person, please raise your hand and I will bring you a mic so that folks on the live stream can hear. They won't be able to hear you if you just talk out loud. Online participants can use the Q&A function in Zoom, and Kira will monitor that and read your questions live. And if you're on Zoom and have a question, we would love to know where you're asking from. So with that, I would love to open it up to Q&A. Awesome.
Hey, y'all.
Hi.
What's poppin'?
How you doing?
Amazing work, the both of you. Teri, I have your book sitting in my studio, which is adjacent to Savannah's studio. So it's really great seeing both of you in this space doing this type of work. Savannah, hi.
You love to give me a question.
Yes. Girl, you know I love to give you a question. And it right now, thinking about everything that you guys just discussed, you like dipped a little bit into like your own artistic journey. And I just wanted to know, how has doing this type of work for so long influenced the way that you document and archive your own practice as a artist?
Thank you for that. Because my artistic practice is so pushed to the margins by the like spread of my day-to-day work, I have to have some systems in place to at least like keep the names and dates of things together. So in a practical sense, like I keep Word docs that have, you know, it's like a work list basically that has an image, that has the runtime, that has the date, that has the title, so I don't lose track of those things, because I can, you know, go off that way. So I document it in that way. I try to update my website. I still need to upload the video that Mecca and I made, which is not on there yet. So that's coming soon. Thank you for the reminder. And I try also to like keep any kind of physical material that is produced in relation to the work. So if there's any kind of like catalog that comes out, or like ephemera from an actual exhibition or something, I have a space that I tuck that stuff away in my house. Like I file it like I file tax documents.
Okay.
You know? So it's not sexy, it's just the regular like stuff. But was that getting to the heart of what your question was? Okay, that's it.
Any other questions? Go in the back, and then I'll come to you.
I somehow was not expecting a microphone. Okay, thank you. I saw everyone else get one, but my commiserations. I am doing a much smaller construction project. It is awful. But thinking about the amount of material that you have from 130 plus years, how do you plan going forward when it seems like now we generate so much more news every day? How do you kind of think about the expansion of the collection over time?
Yeah, I mean, we generate a lot, but there's also so much that's born digital, which is a whole other problem that we haven't really begun to tackle in earnest yet. So that will be a whole other can of worms that we'll get into. Like, there's still a lot of physical things that are being created, and we keep a few boxes in the office that we're filing Afro Charities stuff into, not filing, dumping Afro Charities stuff into, that somebody is going to go through and organize, I hope. And then we're asking the Afro News team to hold on to physical papers, like 5 copies of each one that goes out, because they're still printing physical newspapers. I'm getting random things from people from funerals that they're going to, which is the kind of material that we have in the collection right now. It's like when a reporter would go to a funeral of somebody who was well known, they would take notes on the funeral program, and that's the type of stuff that's filed with their materials, you know? So we're asking for those things. Whether or not people are actually doing it is another question. But we don't expect that the physical materials will be at such a volume that we'll be in trouble. We also overestimated for the amount of space that we would need in the building, so that we have some room there. But the born digital materials is where we're going to be really needing to focus next, is thinking about making sure that all of those things are in order. And there's some order to it now, like the digital files for all the newspapers that are produced are organized to a certain degree, but it's, you know, it's a little loose. So it's something that if I think about it, it'll keep me up at night, but most of the time I don't even have the space in my head to think about it, so yeah.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Wallace. I am the vice president of an organization called the East Baltimore Historical Library. Mm-hmm. And I've been honored to be on the front page twice. One of my friends wrote some articles for the Afro. It's really cool to be sitting here experiencing this with you guys. So EBHL, it's in the process of digitizing all of its archives and putting itself to the place where it's sustainable. How would you best go about maybe just starting that organization process? We have some physical files, like in the building, it's small, and then we have some digital records from like other organizations. And I just want to make sure that, as we start this process that, we're passionate about it and are doing it in an ethically way.
I think you want to get a survey of all the things that you're planning to digitize first. You want to have a sense of the scope. And I'm not, let me start by saying this. I am not a digital archivist. I am the person who raises money and goes out and talks to people. And there are people who know this way better than I do, who are probably online and in this room. But I would suggest that you start with a survey of the physical materials to have a sense of what's actually there, and from there creating some categories so that you can begin to approach it and thinking about what's going to be most useful to you and to the people that you imagine are going to be using these materials. So what kind of information will they want to know about this? Then you can start to think about categories for metadata also, like the dates that things were created, where they might have come from, what formats they're in. So starting to create those groupings so that you have sort of like a lexicon that you're starting with, so that when you get into it, you're not like, oh crap, we forgot. We have CDs and we didn't create a category for, so you have just a general overview and can go in with as much information as possible. I would start there. Yeah.
Oop. We have time for maybe one or two more questions.
Hi. So I remember I had been into the Afro Archives on Charles Street, and so I empathize with the task you're kind of handling right now. My question is sort of trying to think about this in the shell of the art and feminism, and the introduction talking about how that 80% of the editors are cis white males, and that of course effectuate downstream of what comes out of Wikidata. And I liked that y'all are deciding to process your archives yourselves, because then y'all are deciding what is of historical value. And I was kind of thinking about that in terms of Haitian historian Michel Rotrio's Silence in the Past, and how there are gaps in the historical archive. In the process of processing yourself and be able to decide what does and doesn't have historical value, and maybe this is a question for Megan to sign off on, are y'all figuring out, is there scholarship that could come out of this that could, to say, as an archivist, dealing with Black media, these are the things that we should be thinking about, A, and B, now that you're kind of working with this large data set that you're deciding, what matters now, are y'all also in the process of deciding, not only what matters of historical value now, but maybe what should we be kept, holding on to going forward?
Yeah, all really good questions. I want to say that we're not making value judgments. I'm not sure that that's entirely true. But basically what we're doing is going through, we've selected a subset of the collection that we're calling the general file. It's about 1,200 linear feet. And within that, we're just documenting what's there and making sure that there's no gaps in the inherited data that we have, updating it. And one of the things that I should mention, particularly in this context, is we made the specific decision to document women's names wherever we find them, because so often women will be filed under their husband's names in the documents and you cannot find them. Even if all of the information's about them, there's still that skewed lens. So that's what we're doing primarily in the processing. We're also taking sharp cuts, these metal plates, out of the folders so that they're not cutting up materials. So we're trying to make the actual physical environment for the materials better for their longevity. So things that are folded up in there, we're taking those out into oversized boxes, that kind of work. But we're not really making value judgments about what are we going to document and what are we not. We're just trying to make sure we have an accurate accounting of what's there. But that said, we decided to start with that part of the collection because we thought this is probably what people will want to see most of. And what's really fascinating about the Afro Archives is that the subjects are people's names, we went through the J's. I think there were 1,600 Johnson folders. It's just people. It's actually kind of equalized in a way where it's it could be a Johnson that is John H. Johnson of Ebony Jet renown, or it could be, Mr. Johnson, the janitor who works in this building, who had an article written about him, because the Afro is documenting all of those stories, and they're all just being filed away because the story was written, and now we put it in the folder, and we don't know. Maybe Mr. Johnson's going to do something else, and we want to come back to that folder. But they're all in there together. And I think that's actually what's kind of beautiful about the collection, is that there's such a huge breadth of information in there, and there's so many people's families that are documented in the collections. There's so many minute histories. There's birthdays of, just like, oh, these 2 kids were born on January 1st and they're going to be on the front page of the Afro this week, just because they're cute and we think it's going to sell the paper, like, so there's so much in there. And I don't remember what your second question was. Yes.
Can you repeat the question for the folks on the
Yes. If as we're going through this process, if there are any things that we're recognizing, oh, we should be keeping this because of what we're seeing in the past. I will say, just like personally, I find that I am putting dates on things much more frequently because I want to have a record of like when stuff actually happened, because that's such a benefit when we're able to look at the backs of these images and see like, oh, this was reprinted 3 times. Then we can cross-reference it with the digitized newspapers and say, well, why was it reprinted 3 times? But they'll stamp it each time the photo was used. So that kind of stuff is like helpful to know just for the context. I don't know. Yeah, sometimes I think about notes and like, should I keep these notes? Should I not keep these notes? I would have loved to have had a journal from Martha Murphy. So I'm gonna keep all my journals, just in case like one of my nephews down the road is like interested. But yeah, thank you. Yeah.
So I think we have one more question over here, and then I'm gonna kick it back to Teri to ask the final question.
Thank you so much. Hey, thank you so much for this event. It's so beautiful. So I have a question for Teri and Kira. This is a question from the Art and Feminism Leadership. I received a petition not too long ago for the Art and Feminism Workers United, asking for you guys to withdraw the challenge to the NLRB jurisdiction over your organization. I was told that you guys fired most of your unionized staff. Are you guys willing to withdraw from your petition to protect other workers? What's the status on that?
I'm going to kick it back over to Teri and ask that we keep questions towards the conversation that's happening up front here. So I think Teri's going to close us out with one last question, and then you all can join us out for drinks in the hall.
So the final question is, and thank you, Savannah, for your work and being here. If people want to support the Capitol campaign for the new building or explore the archives, where should they go?
Sorry. I'm like, well, I want to hear the answer to that question too. But they can go to afrocharities.org/donate, and they can also follow us online at Afro Charities. Thanks for the question. We hope that you guys will check us out and support. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, and I'm just going to highlight a couple of quick things coming up with Art and Feminism. So we'll have an Intro to Wikidata and Archives event that's on January 29th. And then Intro to Editing on Wikidata and mobile, which is with Wikimedia Botswana. And that is going to happen, in February. And then finally, Wiki Ventures Assemble, a University of Michigan library case study that will happen at the end of February. So thank you all so much.